You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to Beast Over Burden. I'm your host, Niki Sims. With me is my co-host, Andrew Jackson. Today he is going by Andrew Beefcake Jackson.
Beefcake.
Feeling beefy and cakey today, Andrew?
Trying to. I've been recovering from a cold. I don't know what variety, what strain it is, but after almost 2 weeks consecutive on the road, my body finally decided to shut down.
Yeah.
And it's been head cold, congestion, aches and pains, and just finally starting to feel some signs of normal life coming back, which is nice.
That is nice. It was a big couple weeks. We did some cool stuff.
It was a lot of fun.
We went to an Air Force base to talk about a project that we're doing with them. We went to the All In Summit in LA during LA's heat wave. We were all dying. And All In Summit was so cool. I thought the speakers were amazing. We listened to Elon Musk. We were in the same room as Elon Musk.
Yep.
After he had a conversation, not with us directly, but we were there. He left to do that launch, during which the first private citizen spacewalk happened, which was neat that we were just like along the way in California. Then he flew to Florida.
Well, he actually flew to California from Florida. And then that night, I think the launch was at like midnight or something, flew back to Florida, did the launch.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then on to SaaS conference.
Yep.
Now that we're software as a service provider people.
Yep. That was cool.
Just very educational,
it
eye-opening.
Was. What about it to you was eye-opening?
Well, just being immersed in there were probably several thousand people there, all very focused on how to grow and scale their businesses within the software community. It was a heavy focus on AI, which is all the rage. I talked with several people who were tinkering with AI a year ago, and it's now their
entire business
or their product.
Yeah.
Yeah. That they've just started up within the last couple of months, and there were these big professional booths there that I talked with people, and we met a couple of them trying to figure out whether they could be helpful or not, and set up some demo calls this week that I've been following up on. And a lot of them just started, just a few months ago. And I'm used to thinking about Turnkey Coach as a new product. And these are baby products that have been around even less time than that.
And also by very young founders,
Yeah.
super young, 20s. I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to hear where they're at, what they're struggling with. And it's also kind of validating because we mostly operate in our own little universe, but then to step out into the world and hear what other companies are dealing with, and that many of them are the same as what we're dealing with, and that many of the things that we're doing are in the right direction of what professionals are doing that have crazy budgets and teams. That was the one thing that was a bit overwhelming, was how huge the teams were. That these companies all had significantly bigger brands and budgets and teams. So every problem tended to start with, well, make sure you get all of the people together across the whole organization that are working on this. And it's like, oh, you mean me and maybe one other person?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to do afterward actually is write out all of my roles. And I was like, okay, well, I have 6 different roles. So let me write out all of my responsibilities for each role so that I can understand what's expected of me more clearly for each role. So that when I have a meeting with myself and a couple other people on each of our roles teams, it'll have some clear direction. Yeah.
So that was fun. And then I topped off the whole thing with a whirlwind trip through Oregon, back to my alma mater, Oregon State University, where one of my former teammates Joey Hansen, who was an Olympic gold medalist on the 2004 men's 8 team, was inducted into the Oregon State University Hall of Fame.
Go Joey.
Alongside Jaquiz Rogers, who was a professional football player. Pat Casey, who was the head coach of the Oregon State men's baseball team, to 3 College World Series championships, back-to-back in 2007 and 8, I think, and then one in 2018, I think it might have been. So pretty amazing tenure that he had. And then there was Derek Anderson was another NFL quarterback that was inducted. Jacoby Ellsbury, I think it was, a professional baseball player, was up there on the stage. So it's pretty good company and a lot of fun to be back in my hometown, also Corvallis, Oregon. Went to what used to be called the Civil War. The Civil War has since been canceled. Oregon State versus University of Oregon. And I think just being around over the course of that roughly 2 weeks or a week, and I think it's actually only a week and a half of travel, we were probably in proximity, or at least I was, of like 40,000.
Yeah, you were 40,000 with that game you went to.
With the being at the stadium.
Airports, we were at LAX.
The weather extremes to go from like, high desert Salt Lake in the 90s to coastal heat wave in the hundreds to kind of a cool fall day in Oregon I think that took a toll on my system.
Yeah, I bet it did.
That was the longest rant ever about a head cold, but man flu is in full effect.
So you've been on a couple of rants lately. Which rant do you want to talk about on this episode?
Well, the one that was on my mind, it kind of started with you, a conversation we were having about boundaries, I think. And that got me thinking about figuring out how to set your boundaries, which I think for me starts with understanding your priorities and what's really important to you, so that you know what capacity you have for either different relationships, responsibilities, etc. Because I think that a lot of times people go through life without being clear about what their priorities are, and then get into situations where they're overextended from where their boundaries should or could be. And that leads to a negative experience because people feel either taken advantage of or resentful because they're underappreciated or overextended and just worn out. And so this was a shower thought. I think I was in the middle of...
Shower thoughts are so good.
Yeah. Just a middle of zoning out in the shower. It's probably because it's one of the few times there's like no
input
distractions.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the one time you're kind of alone with your thoughts.
Just rinsing your butt and thinking.
There's a long inside joke there, but I definitely think that's one of the top areas to rinse.
One of the bottom areas to rinse.
You gotta keep that fresh. I thought that it got me thinking that it's been a while since I've just really sat down and written out on paper, what are my actual priorities? What are the priorities that I want to be intentional about? Then the next step is match that up against my actions and make sure that I'm in alignment. It's a type of integrity. I've talked a lot about building trust. Start by building trust with yourself. And I think that starts with aligning your actions with what you say, or at least what you intend to do. And I think a lot of times you can feel uncomfortable with yourself because you don't have integrity between your actions and what you think your priorities are. And of course, the standard list of things came up with Clara, my daughter, you, my relationships, my family, the business. But the thing that I kept coming back to was that my health, as I'm sitting here recovering from being sick and probably overextended myself in some ways, it just really stood out to me that prioritizing my health, I think it's a responsibility to make that my number one priority. I think that might be my number one priority. Could be physical, mental, spiritual. It's a broad term and it's difficult to say exactly what all that encompasses. But if I don't prioritize my own health, the one thing and the only person, you've talked about this before, the only person that can take action to prioritize my health. No one else can do that for me.
Yeah.
And if I don't do it for myself, everyone around me, all other priorities are going to suffer. Just like when they say on the plane, the oxygen mask falls, put the freaking oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can stay alive long enough to put it on your children.
Yeah.
So it's a bit counterintuitive, but I think that's the rant that I kind of got on while I was rinsing my butt in the shower.
Because you have to be well enough to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's where like the other priorities kind of come out. And if you're not well enough to do those, then none of those priorities can actually exist, you know?
Yeah. And not just well enough, but as close to top performance as possible. I notice this all the time, you know, when I'm not sleeping well, my ability to regulate my emotions diminishes.
Yeah.
Then my work relationships suffer. You know, I'm more reactive or I'm more snappy. And it's not just like not being sick. You're going to get sick. You're going to get injured. Like stuff's going to happen, but it's prioritizing in your day and your actions, your own health.
What do those actions look like when you are prioritizing?
Obviously, as Barbell Logic, look, we're going to encourage people to train.
Hell yeah, we are.
And for me, I think probably number one is consistently getting to the gym and training. And even this week when I was sick and I felt like my head was going to explode, my back hurt, my knee hurt, everything hurt, I still went into the gym and I squat as heavy as I could muster up for the day because I knew that was, even though I didn't feel good in the moment, it was important to do as part of the process of training. And even in that relatively sick state, making time to do that. Now, there might be times where, you know, making time to take a break is the right move, or getting to bed early or eating well. But what I notice is that when I prioritize getting under the bar, all else kind of falls into place.
Like going to bed and food choices.
Yes. If I start letting the training slip, it feels like you can get away with the other things not being as dialed in. I think a lot of that's because I have high expectations for myself in terms of performance under the bar. So if I go into the gym and my performance isn't what I expect of myself, then I get frustrated. And so I tighten up the rest of the day, which is one of the things I think is difficult with travel because you're just kind of in survival mode.
Yeah.
But I think you posted about how you prioritize your health, even in the midst of all that travel, right? How did you handle being in 4 different states in 3 days? And
yeah, at the end of it, and even during it, I was looking around at all the people there and like knowing that's like going to many different conferences and traveling a lot is a very big part of people's lives. And you travel a whole bunch. I love to travel, so I travel a bunch. But when you travel to a conference, like it takes up your whole day and it kind of owns your schedule. And it kind of hijacks when you can train, when you can get your other work done, and what you can eat. And you still have choice, though. There are still choices you can make. And it was important to me that I not go entirely off the rails because I knew that during this fall, I think we have like 9 trips in 11 weeks or something. And I know if I'm not somewhat controlled, then I will be heavier than I want to be, feel worse in the gym than I want to. And I don't want to feel like that. So it's a culmination of choices. And a lot of those choices were looking at my food options, what would be the best choice I can make, and knowing that I can Uber Eats and DoorDash. You can have access to so many good food choices with Uber Eats and DoorDash that I think you don't take advantage of, because the food and drinks at conferences is, air quotes, free, but that's actually not free. Like, you have paid for it with your ticket, and you will pay for it in your body if you're not careful. So you still have to have some control over all those choices. And yeah, I had some merch treats and I had some drinks, but it could have been way worse. So having some constraints. So making the best choices I could, making sure I did eat. You were really good about making sure we walked. I picked hotels that had good gyms. Like, I spent a lot of time choosing a hotel based on the gym that it had. And I used it. So that was helpful.
You know what I noticed at the All In Summit?
It's full.
was how busy the gym was
Yeah.
beforehand. I mean, we were actually...
I've never been in a hotel gym that full.
I'd never seen a hotel gym that full, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were staying at that hotel from the conference, but
Yeah.
we were definitely the only people using that gym.
Totally true. There's so many choices that can be made, and you can choose to just forget that you have a life outside of this conference that matters to you in a couple weeks, or you can think of how you want to feel when you get home. And while you're not going to be optimal, because travel on its own is really tough for sleep and dehydration, you can feel better than awful. And that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, I think the hotel gym and walking make such a huge difference. It's one of those aspects of the 10,000 step target that you could argue it's arbitrary. And I don't think there's anything magical about 10,000 steps. I think there's well-documented benefits to walking, and particularly after a meal, getting in a shorter brisk walk. But what I like about the 10,000 step goal is just the behavior change. Even if I don't hit it,
right,
I feel that pull to go out for a walk, even if it's just a 10-minute walk after dinner. Feels so much better. And then going into the hotel gym, I was shocked. The second gym for the SaaStr conference had up to 75-pound dumbbells.
Yeah.
Homewood Suites. It's like, wow.
They had a Peloton, really good cable machine.
Put a couple of 75-pound dumbbells and do goblet squats or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, all of our workouts were under 30 minutes.
That was pretty legit. I was huffing and puffing after a few sets of 10, 15 reps. And then with an incline bench, that's a pretty decent weight to be able to get up to, and do some RDL/deadlift kind of movement or some chin-ups. And I actually came back this week and benched my planned... I was still able to rep 325, somewhere in there, just shy of 330 for 3 sets of 5 on bench.
Nice. That's great.
Which is pretty much picking up where I left off. It was harder than pre-travel.
Yeah.
And I've certainly lifted more than that, but that's not losing a whole lot of ground. Squat, I always have a little bit harder time coming back from, but even with a head cold and everything, I was still doing 3 sets of 5 at 365 at, probably RPE 7-ish. So the time to get back to your normal work weights is so much faster. You feel better. You just kind of mitigate the damage a little bit.
Yeah, like when we got back from Utah, we worked out that day. It was a Saturday. It was a lower body day. I remember I was supposed to either do a heavy single or a 3x3 at 315. And the previous week I did like 2x2 or something at 350 or 2 at 350. I don't know. But on that Saturday, after getting off the plane, my heavy single was 315.
Yeah.
But the next week, I did my lower body the day after getting home, and I was able to, I went up from that. I think I did 3 at 315.
Wow.
So it was great. Yeah. Another thing I noticed that I did was I worked out on all of my travel days. Like when I was at home, I got my workouts in on travel days.
Wow.
Which I think was useful.
That's awesome.
But it's helpful for me to get workouts in because it kind of breaks the mental exhaustion momentum and refreshes me mentally. And like you were saying, what does that do for showing up for other people? And for me, that helped me show up better to these conferences where we were spending our time and spending our money at. I was able to show up better, learn more, have better discussions. One of the mornings I had a work issue that I had to address before and during my workout before the day. And I think knowing that I was still able to get in and do some chin-ups at the hotel gym was helpful, because if I don't train, that's a violation of my boundaries.
Right.
And I don't like when I let that happen. And so that goes back to what you were saying of like having your priorities and then holding your boundaries around them so that you can show up in a way that is meaningful to you.
Well, that's why I think it gets de facto priority number 1, because it's almost... Often when you're talking about priorities, it's about making a decision of what you're not going to do or what you're going to do. By prioritizing your health, it's a force multiplier for you being able to do or to show up for the other things that are important to you. So in that example, working out didn't take away from your ability to deal with the work problem. It helped you respond to the work problem better.
Yeah.
It also doesn't mean that by prioritizing your health that there aren't any compromises, or that it's, I'm going to work out 6 hours a day and count my macros perfectly no matter what, but it means that your actions, you put energy and thought into how you're going to prioritize your health given the circumstances that you have. And of course, making decisions with other priorities in mind. But the conference is a great example because you weren't able to train in your normal routine. You didn't even do a fraction of what you normally do in terms of intensity or volume.
Not even close.
Or frequency, but you still prioritize your health by doing something and, doing the best you could and making choices with the actions that you can control within your circumstances that still put a high priority on your own health.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key takeaway for me is, getting out of, this goes back to training for improving the quality of your life versus training to be as strong as possible, decision. Because the decisions we made were not going to make us as strong as possible. Maybe in the long run, you could argue it is, but they definitely were decisions and trade-offs that will improve the quality of our life in the moment, in that context. And then once we get back to our training and, once we're off the road, not in that circumstance. The reason it becomes a bit of a rant is that it's common to see, and I've done it myself, where I will end up in a situation where I deprioritized my health for the sake of some other priority or responsibility and let myself feel like a victim of that decision. Instead of taking ownership of whatever those trade-offs were and that the actions that I could control, what I was really getting upset at wasn't the situation. It's that I think deep down inside, upset with myself for not holding that boundary to prioritize my own health.
Yeah, that's where discomfort lives. Totally.
Because those are the only things you can control, right?
Yeah, it's your choices. I feel it a lot when I violate my financial boundaries. Like
your own?
I think it's the same feeling. Yeah, like I use YNAB. I have money. I put it where I know it's important to me. But then when I deviate from that plan, I feel this I don't know if it's remorse. But it's even though I have enough money, I don't have debt. But if I make a choice that goes against what I'd already decided was important to me, I don't feel good. And I think that's similar because it's my own boundary. No one cares. I don't owe anybody anything. It's my own choices. I have enough money for everything. But I still was like, hey, that wasn't in line with what I decided at another time was important to me. Now I feel weird about it. And I think that's similar.
How do you balance that with, one of the core principles of YNAB is to roll with the punches? I think that applies to training as well. Where do you draw the line between rolling with the punches and violating a boundary? And just to clarify by that, in the context of YNAB, you assign money to your different categories. And then one of the big differences between a traditional budget and YNAB is because it's forward-facing, giving a job every dollar a job. If something comes up where you need to spend money in a different category, you roll with the punches by moving from one bucket to another.
Because it's not anything I need to spend money on.
Okay.
It's, let me buy this pair of shoes instead of continuing to save up for a trip that I'm really excited about. Versus two things that I really want and are just quality of life things where I'm just I didn't really need to do that. Yeah. So it's when it's the things that I want.
Sounds like it was that the priorities got out of alignment.
My actions didn't line up with what I had decided was my priority.
Gotcha.
And that's all on me. I couldn't be mad at any single person but myself. I violated my own boundaries.
Right. Full circle back to training. I think the same is true there. It's, if somebody's not able to get some version of training, will it always look perfect? Will it always be a 4-day split, hour-long workouts, or 3 days a week, 90 minutes? No. You can still make choices to get your training. I mean, we've talked about it before, dropping down to one exercise a day. Maybe you're only training twice a week. Maybe you're just doing body weight and dog food exercises. Maybe you're not counting calories, but you're still using your hand to measure out portion control. But prioritizing physical activity and, one other reason it was a bit of a rant. So speaking of the All-In Summit, they had on this scientist.
Oh, yeah.
I think they spent 2-3 hours on this subject of the Hashimoto. That's not even the right thing. The yakisoba factor.
Yeah. I actually can't remember.
This guy that was had discovered a way of pulsing your body with some sort of energy that would kind of like trick your genes to heal or to like
regenerate. Yeah, it's a regenerative
basically
science. Yeah.
So they had all these mice studies where they had de-aged the mice. Same genotype had a different phenotype with this therapy at the same age. And he gets done with his presentation. It's this amazing breakthrough. And they sit down to interview him. And at one point, the panelist asks him, like, so have you seen anything else that does this kind of, has this regenerative effect? When he's like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, exercise. Nothing compares to exercise. And I called it. I think I turned to you like
the
10 minutes earlier.
Like, maybe they'll tell them to exercise.
Maybe they should just freaking squat. Like they're like irradiating people and mice and walking them, and you got to do this therapy and that therapy and take this pill. And I'm just like, how about you just squat? And,
and they're like, nah.
The guy who interviewed him, Chamath, asked him back, well, yeah, but how much?
And the guy was like, well, it has to be enough to be stressful. And we were like, yes, it does.
Yes.
Awesome.
So I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's a good rant. I'm looking forward to the next one.
So if you're wondering how much stress you could apply to regenerate your body, give us a call. Where can they go, Niki?
barbelllogic.com/experience. Do a call with us. My calendar's on there. You might get to listen to me tell you how much stress you need or talk to you about your training. The other Niki's on there. Ian's on there. barbelllogic.com/experience. Set up a call. Be happy to tell you about that.
Panelist, by the way, was Chamath Palihapitiya, a billionaire, venture capitalist, early Facebook employee. If anybody out there knows Chamath Palihapitiya, can hook us up to help him figure out how to work out, how much stress, how much lifting. Give us a call. We met him very briefly, but he needs to lift.
He does. I touched his arm. It was disappointing. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please give us a review. Make sure you're subscribed.
Like, subscribe, and share. If you know somebody that would enjoy this podcast, share with them. Tell your friends.
Awesome. All right, everybody. See you next time.
Bye-bye.